And welcome back, everybody. This time, week 3, and we're still having fun. This week, we're looking at organizational structures and the role, the power, the authority of a project manager. We've already established that projects, the need, the responsibility, the authority is growing and changing consistently based on some of the items in the slide attached. You can pause and review those from previous lessons. So the question we're going to ask now is, how do we tie our effort to the overall project effort, right? How do we make this happen, right? We may have limited power. Does not make the company the problem. It just is something we have to learn to work within. But we may have a tremendous amount of power and authority. Either way, we are responsible. So it is common that you would look at your power, your authority as a project manager within 4 different types of organizational structures. We call them functional, projectized, matrix, and composite, the centerpiece of this. And so a functional organization is really stovepipe is the nickname for it. So think of verticals like pillars, straight up and down. In my Air Force career, we were always organized by function, by stovepipe. So we'd put all the pilots and anybody that flew, even aeromedical people that were flyers, that were the medical people that worked on people in flight, right? Those were all aircrew in one stovepipe. Then we had aircraft maintenance in another stovepipe. Then we had Air Force intelligence in a separate stovepipe, right? And these were functions that work together. So the engineers might form a function. The PMO is a function. It's a function of project managers in this project management organization, right? Think of it that way. And so it's a way to assign work and tasks. The neat thing about a functional organization is this is where your expertise resides. The functional manager owns the experts, right? And so this is a good graph of various functions. You can see the stovepipes up and down. And really, to talk to people, you have to go up the stovepipe through the functional manager, over to another functional manager, and down, right? And it makes conversation challenging. And the functional manager, the various functional managers, they really have the authority in this type of organization. Kind of getting ahead of myself because we have advantages and disadvantages like we do with everything, right? You just have to understand what they are and maximize them. So speaking of maximizing, one of the advantages of a functional organization for a functional manager is that it maximizes their ability to use the staff, right? And I mentioned that the functional managers own the experts, right? And so the advantage to use project manager is if your current expert needs time off for a family issue, you go back to the functional manager and they'll have someone else in the pool that will be their equivalent, right? And so they're also going to have specialists along the way. You want, as the project manager, a good working relationship with the functional manager. Now, some disadvantages are that they're not focused on your project. You are. They aren't client focused. You, the project manager, are. And so we have to figure out as project managers, how do we work to keep the functional manager informed, not over-informed, not under-informed, that'll drive them crazy, but informed based on their needs so that we can help them understand the customer focus in light of the overall corporate need, and that should motivate them a little bit, and that maybe the chance for some glory, some of their people to get awards or things like that. And so it tends to optimize a project, but while for the company, why would they do a functional organization? Because it optimizes their management of specialists along the way and functions. So After a functional organization, the next one was a projectized organization. And so a projectized organization is no longer focused on the stovepipe function, right? But which we called a silo. That's a silo is the nickname. The nickname in a projectized organization is called no home, because everybody on this slide works for you, the project manager. This project manager has a whole team. This one has a whole team. The reason it's called no home as a nickname is that when the project's done, they're done. Express Scripts is a good example of a projectized organization. But frankly, it works out well. I have friends that do that for a living, and they like getting a few months off. But because of their hard work and dedication, they're always called back for another assignment. They enjoy that sort of in and out flow. But you as the project manager not only have the project responsibility, but you have a responsibility for taking care of the team. Frankly, we always do anyhow. And so in a project-based organization, you have all the authority. You aren't reliant on answering to a functional manager. You own the budget, right? It's all yours. So like anything, it has advantages and disadvantages, right? You, as I mentioned, are fully responsible. Everybody reports right to you, right? So the lines of communication are very short. And I think it expedites your decision-making authority, because you no longer have to then go manage a functional manager along the way. So it provides a sort of unity of command and effort. Now, there are disadvantages, and this is one reason companies don't do it. When they don't, is because it can duplicate staffing. So what companies like to do is a matrix organization where you already work here in a function, but you know what? Here's a project you're on, and now you're going to work both in a matrix fashion. We're getting there. But if it's just a projectized organization, it can duplicate staffing. Now, I might have a quality person on each project instead of one that all of these projects report up to in the function. Because there are various projects, there can be sometimes inconsistent policies. I find that most of these stockpiling of resources, etc., I find that most of these disadvantages go away when a projectized organization works for a PMO, a project management office at the top. They will help manage the staffing and ensure consistent policies and make sure that the policy project functions within it. Now, the third of the four types of of organizational types is a matrix organization, which is the most common, right? And so matrix organization is a matrix function and the project team. You're matrixed together somehow. There are various varieties of it. There's a weak matrix, a strong matrix, and a balanced matrix. A weak matrix will look most like a functional organization, where the functional manager has most of the authority. A strong matrix organization, most of the authority, though you're still working with the functional manager, most of the authority will reside with the project manager. And in a balanced organization, you and the functional manager have to work together regularly, right? So it's kind of a combination of forms. And so here is an example of your projects are using people from manufacturing and marketing and finance, and you're matrixed together, right? With other projects as well and other efforts that the company is working on. Now that's in a strong matrix. You can see that there's some balance, and the project manager and the functional managers are kind of working together. That's in a strong matrix. In a weak matrix, the project, like I said, looks most like a functional organization. So you might have a full-time person. You, the project manager, might only be part-time. Your role is so weak, right? And the functional departments are going to manage the budget and the capacity, and you really become a coordinator or a coordinator or an expediter, right, is really what your function is reduced to in a weak matrix. There are advantages, right, and you can pause and review those at your leisure, and of course disadvantages, because the whole point of this entire conversation is that power is a delicate balance, and it really doesn't matter how much or how little you have. What matters is that you're responsible for the project, and you must understand the power structure that you work within so that you can maximize your advantages, and you understand when and to whom you need to escalate for support if you need to do that when managing the division of responsibility. We don't want to forget about virtual projects. Those are a real thing, and it's more common in the modern world, and even more common post-COVID, right? So virtual projects, you want to make sure that the team has access to you, that they're represented at meetings, and that they're active. Make them go visual. See their face. Know that they're engaged with you. I would keep virtual office hours so that I was just on doing my work at my desk, but if somebody got on the common link, they were visual. It's like they walked into my office. I would also do Friday, even though you're at home during COVID, a drink of your choice, Coke, water, whatever, and we'll sit at 4 p.m. on a Friday and just talk virtually, tell stories like we would do in the old days. So there are ways to manage it, right? It can be challenging. And it can also be interesting, both the people and the projects themselves. And so frequent communication, like I said, I would leave a line open so that people could have access to me, and ran a checklist often to make sure work was getting done and that meetings were run efficiently. Now, the last type of organization is a composite organization, which is really a grouping, right? It's a grouping. It's some mashing of those other types of organizations. Matrix, which were weak, balanced, and strong, functional, or projectized, right? You can make a composite organization to fit your needs along the way. Okay, and so selecting a project form can be a very interesting and also delicate process along the way. An organization usually develops well ahead of your project. Not that the project is going to change the organization, right? So the structure of an organization can evolve over time, true. But in the moment, in your life period of an organization, it probably isn't going to, right? So you would understand it. And it's also important to note that a functional organization is probably best when there's an in-depth application of technology. So in the aviation world that I mentioned, that's why a functional organization, when you have specialists, was important to manage, people that understood the language, the technology, the best practices, etc. But it is a large capital investment. Now, a projectized organization is better when you have a lot of similar projects being handled, and and you need a focused team on it. Agile would be an example, though we're largely talking predictive or waterfall developmental life cycle. Agile would be a form of predictive. Express Scripts has waterfall projects that are, because they have short technical projects, 6 months, and they know they will conclude, right? And then, of course, matrix form is best when you need input from a lot of functional areas, and that technology is spread over multiple